Good morning. Thank you for joining us again as we continue in our study of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. The lesson we're on today is Barabbas, and our scriptures are Luke 23, 13 through 16, Matthew 27, 19 through 25, and Mark 15, 7 and 8. We're going to go to three of the different Gospels to get a full picture of this today, because each one of them has an important part to contribute to this. But I want to bring you up to speed on where we're at first. If you've been watching this, then you know we started in the Garden of Gethsemane. And, well, let me just take you through it here just briefly. And I would encourage you to go back, if you have not been watching these regularly, go back and watch the ones that were before this. I think there's 4 or 5 now. I think this is, I can't remember if this is number 5 or number 6, but go back and see them if you have not, and so you can get a full picture of this, because this is just it's just really incredible what Jesus went through for our redemption. Okay, anyway, on the night that he was betrayed by Judas, he went to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. And he went there quite often to draw away and have a time of prayer. And so he goes there that night, and the Bible tells us that he was in agony, that his sweat became as great drops of blood. And that's actually, the American Medical Journal tells us, there's some doctors that did research on this, and they say that this is a real condition that can happen when you're under extreme stress, like Jesus was under. And what happens, the layers of the epidermis of the skin separate, causing a vacuum between them, and it draws the blood from the body, and because you're profusely sweating from the stress you're under, blood actually mixes with the sweat and comes out of your body. And they're actually, I know a woman that she was addicted to opiates, and she died from that addiction, not an overdose, but just the prolonged years of being on them destroyed her liver and kidneys, and her major organs started shutting down. Of course, they were trying to get her off of the opiates, and she was under such, her body was under such stress that I wasn't there, but a friend of mine was there whenever she passed away, and he said that just, right before she passed away, her body, she began to sweat and blood was oozing out of the pores of her skin. And so this is a medical condition that can occur. And Jesus was under so much stress that that's what happened to him in the Garden of Gethsemane. And the stress he was under was because he was getting ready to experience something that no one has and will ever again experience, and that is the sins of the entire universe, the sins of every man, woman, boy, and girl from eternity past to eternity present, for all time, was put on him there in that garden. And he had to bear the sins, he who knew no sin. This was something totally foreign to him. So yeah, he was under a lot of stress, plus what he was going to go through physically. And he knew what he was going to go through. So anyway, they come and arrest him there in the garden, the Sanhedrin Council, and they had over 600, the estimate is between 600 to 1,000 men came with soldiers. Most of them were soldiers that came with them to arrest Jesus, because they were so fearful of him, because they knew of his miraculous abilities and his ability to even sneak away from them, whenever they tried to arrest him before, because they hated Jesus. They wanted him put to death because he was getting the ear of the people. The people looked to him in greater authority than they were looking to the Sanhedrin Council. And this bothered them because he was tearing down their religious playhouse that they had built, and where they sat in a chair, in a throne, as God, dictating to the people what law was and how they should be, and yet they themselves were not obeying the law. So anyway, Jesus spoke out against them repeatedly, and they hated him. And part of the Sanhedrin Council was made up of Sadducees, which Sadducees did not believe in the supernatural. They did not believe in miracles. And so when Jesus began to perform miracles, it really, I mean, he came on their radar big time. And they just wanted to do away with him because he was destroying their political kingdom, their religious kingdom that they had built up that gave glory to them instead of to God. Okay, so, and they had changed the laws. And you'll hear Jesus, as you go through his teachings, he says things like, you have heard it said, but I say unto you. And that you have heard it said was their interpretation of Scripture. But he was saying, I say, here's what it really means. And who better to tell us what the Word of God means than the Son of God himself? Okay, so anyway, they arrest him. They bring him to a kangaroo court that they convene. They bring false accusers against him. And that entire night, they tortured him, hitting him with the fist, open hands, slapping him, I mean, pulling his beard, spitting in his face, everything you could imagine. Anything they could do to humiliate him, to abuse him, physically, mentally, every way that they could. So they decided, before they had even arrested him, that they were going to kill him. They were going to put him to death. So they bring in false accusers, and here's the problem they had. They were ready to put him to death. They'd already passed sentence, but Pilate was in town. And Pontius Pilate, he was the Roman-appointed governor of Judea. And he was a very bloody man. I mean, he had no problems killing the Jews, whether they were guilty or innocent. He hated Jews. He hated their religious system. And the Jews hated him. And so anyway, they know that if they crucify Jesus, that there is a possibility the people will rise up and cause a revolt. Well, if they do, then Rome's iron hand is going to come down on them. And Pilate could have them put in prison or whatever for insurrection. So they think, okay, they hate Pilate. They think, okay, here's our opportunity to not only possibly get rid of Pilate, but at least get him to do our bidding so that we won't look bad in front of the people that we have crucified the one that they care so much about. So they bring him to Pilate, and Pilate, normally he wouldn't even have been there, but his palace was in Caesarea, and he did not go to Jerusalem except during the feasts, and he had to be there during the feast to keep peace because he was already in trouble with Rome. There had been many complaints about his governorship to Rome, and he was on kind of shaky ground with Rome already. So he was there to make sure that there was not an insurrection or an uprising of any sort during the Feast of Passover, which was coming here in the next day or so. So they bring him to him, and he hated them. He hated the Sanhedrin Council, but they served his purpose. So he hated to even be at Jerusalem. So he stayed in Caesarea, and he allowed the Sanhedrin Council pretty well to govern for him. So they bring him to Pilate, thinking that Pilate he had always given them, a rubber stamp to do whatever they wanted. They're figuring that he'll do the same thing here. So this is early the next morning after they had tortured Jesus all night. At daylight, they bring Jesus with the numerous charges against him, okay? The charges that concerned Pilate was inciting people not to pay tax that Caesar had required of them, and also the charge that he had proclaimed himself to be king of the Jews, because Caesar would no longer allow anyone to be called king. You were supposed to look at Caesar as God, okay? And Caesar did not allow anyone else to be called king. After Herod the Great, which was known as King Herod, died, Caesar no longer would allow anyone to proclaim themselves as king, and he split up Herod the Great's kingdom and distributed it out in 4 sections to rulers that he appointed. Okay, So anyway, Pilate knew that if he did not handle these charges carefully, he could be in trouble with Rome. And so it was obvious that the Sanhedrin had treated this man, Jesus, really bad. And they tied him up like a criminal. They'd severely beaten him, bruised him, and then brought him to Pilate. So Pilate, he goes ahead and he convenes court. Now here's the thing. The Jews would not even enter Pilate's palace there, where his judgment hall, because the Passover was the next day, or the day after that one. But anyway, here's the problem. If they entered a Gentile structure like this, they were considered unclean. And by the time they went through all their ritual, ceremonial cleansing so that they could attend Passover, Passover would have been over. So they won't even go in. And I'm sure this infuriates Pilate even more. That they won't even, he's having to go in the judgment hall, sit on the judgment throne, then go out and tell them what his judgment, as he's questioning Jesus. Well, he can't find anything that's, as a matter of fact, he is just infatuated with Jesus because Jesus answers so precisely, and he doesn't speak against Rome, he doesn't speak against the Sanhedrin, and Pilate just point blank finally asks him, "Are you king of the Jews?" And he said, I think it's Matthew that says, "Did you understand this for yourself, or did someone tell you that?" And then he goes on and tells him, if I was king of this world, my subjects would rise up and they would overthrow it. He said, "But I am not of this world. I am not. My kingdom is not of this world." So Pilate, he's infatuated with Jesus. He just, even though he is a bloodthirsty man himself, and he has no problem putting Jews to death, there's just something about Jesus that just, he's just in awe of him, really. And so he's trying to find a loophole because he don't want to put Jesus to death. And then somebody, one of the Sadducees, or the Sanhedrin Council, talks about, as Pilate continues to say, "I find no fault," they bring more and more charges until one of them says he has stirred up all the people from Galilee unto here. And that clicks immediately. Pilate says, "What? Wait a minute. Go back to that. Galilee?" And they say, "Yes." And he asks, "Is he a Galilean?" And the answer comes back, "Yes, he's Jesus of Nazareth." Well, Pilate says, "Okay, that's it. There's my loophole." And he says, "Okay, Galilee belongs to Herod Antipas. He is the governor over Galilee. So he just happens to be in town here for the Passover. So let's send Jesus to Herod Antipas and let him make the judgment." Okay, so he thinks, it's just about a mile away. So he sends this entire group and Jesus to Herod Antipas to answer for what the Sanhedrin is accusing him of. And he thinks, okay, I dodged the bullet here. I don't have to make this decision. And Herod Antipas, he just elated. He is just giddy with excitement that Jesus is coming to him because he's heard many things about Jesus. I mean, his father had attempted to kill Jesus as a baby, and Jesus had escaped. And he's heard stories all his life of the Magi, coming and proclaiming Jesus as King of the Jews and all this, and how his father had tried to kill Jesus, and Jesus had gotten away, and now he's a ruler of Galilee, so he has heard of all the miracles that Jesus is doing in and around Nazareth. But the thing is, he's never met him himself. And he wants to meet Jesus to see if Jesus might do a miracle or something remarkable because he wants to be entertained. Okay? So he is just giddy with excitement that he is going to get to meet Jesus, and perhaps Jesus might perform a miracle and get him, and let him see it. So he begins to question Jesus. Jesus won't perform a miracle, and he begins to question Jesus, but Jesus won't answer anything. So he thinks, okay, well, this is a bust. So he wants to get something out of the deal. So he allows his soldiers to begin mocking Jesus. They put a robe on him, make fun of him, and at least he got some entertainment out of the thing. But here's it. He just couldn't find anything that Jesus was worthy of death, even though the Sanhedrin just kept throwing accusations against him. So he says, okay, enough's enough. We've had enough fun. And he sends him back to Pilate. Okay, and that's where we come into today's story. He is arriving back before Pilate. Pilate, earlier that day, had dealt with this problem. He thought, sent him to Herod Antipas, and now here he is back again. And Pilate says, okay, I'm going to have to deal with this. So we pick up Luke 23:13, and Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, Pilate finds himself back where he started earlier that morning. Jesus back before him, Sanhedrin council desiring Jesus to be put to death. Pilate goes back outside because remember, the Sanhedrin council won't even come into the judgment chambers because then they would be defiled and couldn't attend the Passover. So he has to go back and forth, and he is probably really getting tired of this. He did it all morning, now he's having to do it again. So he goes back out, calls all the Jews there together to explain what his ruling on this case is going to be. Luke 23:14, said unto them, Ye have brought this man unto me as one that perverteth the people, and behold, having examined him before you, have found no fault in this man touching those things whereof ye accuse him. Luke 23:15, nor yet Herod, which he sent him to, nor yet Herod, for I sent you to him, and lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. Pilate tells them that despite their accusations, neither he nor Herod Antipas has found Jesus guilty of anything that would warrant death. Wow. Luke 23:16, I will therefore chastise him and release him. Pilate states with what his ruling is, he will have Jesus scourged, and then he's going to release Jesus. And you can just imagine, this did not go over well. Matthew 27:19 says, when he had sat down on the judgment seat, his wife sent unto him, saying, have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. And we went to Matthew here to get this part of the story. Pilate goes back into the judgment hall, sits in the judge's chair to render his judgment, but before he can, his wife sends him word to have nothing to do. The Greek word is medas, which means not even one little thing. Have nothing, not even one little thing to do with that just man. The Greek is dikaios, meaning a holy or righteous man, because she has suffered many things. The Greek is paskopalabos, means greatly vexed. She's been greatly vexed in a dream because of him. Now, early church legend states that Pilate's wife's name was Claudia Procula, okay? And several early church writers say that Claudia converted to Christianity and later helped Paul in his ministry and is the woman of the same name that is mentioned by Paul in 2 Timothy 4:21, where it talks about Claudia who has helped him. And historians say that this is the same Claudia that is mentioned as Pontius Pilate's wife, and that she later converted to Christianity. Okay? I don't know. That's just what some historians and theologians say. All right, we're going to go to Mark now and pick up another aspect of this story. Mark 15:7. And there was one named Barabbas, which lay bound with them that had made insurrection with him, whom had committed murder in the insurrections. Barabbas had led a revolt not long before these happenings, not long before, probably within 2 weeks of Jesus in the garden and then Jesus being taken by the Sanhedrin. Barabbas had led a revolt, and in the process he had killed someone. He had been tried and was awaiting execution. Okay? Mark 15:8, and the multitude crying aloud began to desire him to do as he had ever done unto them. Okay, I'm sure the Sanhedrin was behind this. Well, we know they were. We'll get to that in a minute. But they weren't getting Pilate had just said he's going to beat Jesus and then have him released. He's going to chastise him. He's going to scourge him and then release him. Well, they didn't want him released. They wanted him put to death. So they come up with another. Jesus called them a den of vipers, and they're living up to it because they are conniving and they are hatching their evil plans against Jesus here. They say, okay, it's a custom that someone is released before the Passover. Let's make it Barabbas, and then Jesus will have to be put to death because he can't release two people. He can only release one. That's the custom, okay? Matthew 27:20. But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitude that they should ask Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The Sanhedrin, in their hatred for Jesus, would rather a murderer be set free than Jesus, so they persuaded the people to petition for Barabbas to be released. Matthew 27:21. The governor answered and said unto them, Whither of the twain will ye that I release unto you? They said, Barabbas. Matthew 27:22. Pilate said unto them, What shall I do with Jesus, which is called Christ? They all say unto him, Let him be crucified. You have to pardon me a minute. I'm going to get a drink here of coffee. To Pilate's disbelief, the people were willing to release Barabbas, who was guilty of violent insurrection against Rome. What hypocrisy! This is the same charge that they had said Jesus was guilty of, except Barabbas was guilty of violent insurrection and murder. How low could these religious leaders stoop to allow a hardened murderer to be set free so that they could get rid of Jesus? Matthew 27:23. And the governor said, Why? What evil hath he done? But they cried out the more, saying, Let him be crucified. What evil hath he done? That's the evil is the Greek word kakos, and it means a wicked, depraved act. What wicked, depraved act has he done that you would want to set a murderer free? Basically, is what he's asking. They were willing to set free a man who was truly wicked and depraved to have one killed who had helped, healed, and improved the lives of others. What a dark day in Jerusalem history this was to become. But they cried out the more. Cried out is the Greek word krazo, persisos, and it means to scream out at the top of one's voice beyond measure, super abundantly. They were screaming out with everything they possibly could repeatedly. What were they screaming? Let him be crucified. The Greek is stero otos, and it means to impale on a cross. They were saying, impale him on a cross. Okay? The words let him be were not in the original text and were added to bring continuity of thought to what they were repeatedly screaming out. Okay? What they were repeatedly screaming out was crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. Storo-autos, which means crucify him, crucify him. Okay? They just was screaming it out with everything that they had. Matthew 27:24. When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See ye to it. Pilate realized this mob was getting out of hand, and if he didn't do something, if he didn't do as they requested, a riot was going to ensue. Okay? He had already had many complaints against him to Rome, and now, if this got out of hand and a riot ensued, Rome would come down on him with their mighty fist. John 19:12 says, And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release Jesus, but the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar. So the Sanhedrin had already made it clear in a threat to Pilate here that if they did not get the result that they wanted, that they were going to accuse him to Caesar of treason, that he was promoting Jesus, who had claimed to be a king, which was illegal, above Caesar, and he would be tried of treason. So, I mean, they've got Pilate in a really bad position here. Okay, so it says, continuing on Matthew 27:24, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person, see ye to it. Pilate had a bowl and water brought before this mob and performed a ceremony that all Jews would clearly understand. It was a Jewish practice to wash one's hands to proclaim innocence. And you can read this and alluded to, spoken of in Psalms 26:6. And it says, I will wash mine hands in innocency. So will I compass thine altar, O Lord. This was a thing that they would do to show innocence, to wash their hands. They would say, he would say, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See ye to it. Just person is the word dikaios. It means a righteous person. We talked about that a minute ago. See ye to it is the Greek autemana humanus, and it means to see with wide open eyes. Pilate was saying, look closely at what I am doing here. I am proclaiming myself innocent of the blood of this righteous man. That's what he was actually saying. All right, going back to Matthew 27:25. Then answered all the people and said, his blood be on us and on our children. They had no idea the curse that they were bringing on themselves. History records that in the years followed, there were times, this is to them, okay, they said, let his blood be on us, okay, and on our children, on us. History records that in the years followed, there were many times as many as 500 Jews a day were scourged or crucified. It is said that the Roman army had difficulty supplying enough crosses, and every hillside was covered with crosses. So they brought a curse on themselves. His blood was on them, and they suffered for it, because Rome began destroying them like never before. Flavius Josephus records that when Jerusalem was destroyed, and this is talking about in 70 AD, which would have been the generation of these people's children, they said, let his blood be on us, and it was, and on our children, which 70 AD would have been on their children. Whenever Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD, it said that Flavius Josephus said in the courtyard of the temple. Now, you got to remember the courtyard of the temple, and most people don't even know this. The courtyard of the temple was not dirt, like so many people think. You know, whenever Jesus, when the woman taken in adultery was brought before him, and it says Jesus stooped and wrote on the ground. There was no ground there, okay? Because if you read the verses before that, this happened outside the temple, okay? It was massive limestone rocks that paved that temple courtyard, okay? So Jesus actually stooped down and wrote on stone, okay? And that's, I'm going to get sidetracked here if I'm not careful, because there's a remarkable thing there if you get a hold of it. But I'm going to digress from that. Here's the thing. Those massive limestone courtyard rocks, huge, and they're white, just beautiful, okay? Flavius Josephus, the Jewish historian, said in 70 AD, which would have been the generation of these people's children, there was so much blood, so many bodies that covered these massive stones that you could not see the white at all. Not a single square inch was obvious because they were covered with blood and bodies from the destruction in 70 AD. So his blood was on their children also. They spoke this curse on themselves. They said, let his blood be on us and on our children, and it was. Matthew 27:26. Then released he Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Out of fear of the people, Pilate released Barabbas and had Jesus scourged, and delivered Jesus to the Roman army to be crucified. May God bless this reading of His Word. Go with God. Please join us again next week as we continue the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Just be blessed, be blessed, be blessed.